Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:36. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on this Friday, 21st day of June, and a hot one at that. Coming up in 30 minutes, it's Chris Plant taking over. I'm Larry O'Connor with the effervescent Mercedes Schlapp. And speaking of effervescent, this woman is an absolute dynamo and infectious in her passion. She is Jennifer Say. You'll remember as a USA champion gymnast. She's also the producer of the 2020 Emmy-winning documentary Athlete A on Netflix. You'll also remember she spoke her mind about the lockdowns and for her efforts got fired from Levi Strauss, but we're better off for it because it turned her into an absolute activist. And now she is touring the country with Independent Women's Forum at the bus tour to save Title IX. I hung out with her up in Scranton when we kicked off that tour, and she joins us now. Jennifer Say. Jennifer, it's so great to talk with you on the radio. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
It was a long intro, but worth it because you've done so many things, and you're bringing the tour here to D.C. I want to give everyone the details. It's going to be this Tuesday coming up at the Bullpen over by Nats Park in center field. You can you got to register for it, but you'll get all the details. It's free. Riley Gaines will be there. Martina Navratilova will be there, trying to protect women's sports. Tell me what you've experienced here on this bus tour as you've gone all across the country. Meeting young girls, women, and I hope dads are coming out, too, to try to protect their daughters from this.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I haven't been at every stop, but I've been at quite a few, and I'll be in D.C. and Virginia Beach and Nashville. But it's an amazing group of women who are willing to stand up and say women deserve their own sports and spaces out loud, and we've got great crowds coming to each stop. There are kids, there are dads, absolutely. Tons of moms, tons of former athletes who were beneficiaries of Title IX, which is now basically on the chopping block. And I think it's just such a comfort to know that there are other people that will stand with you when you speak up, because it is such a fraught issue, which is crazy. It shouldn't be fraught. It's just a matter of fact that male and female bodies are different and that women's sports as a category were created for a reason.
Yeah.
But you can feel very alone in your own community if you stand up and push back on what's happening within women's sports. So I think it's amazing to build community. And just like I said, to know you're not alone when you stand up, and to hear all the amazing speakers who have had incredible experiences, and to sort of take a cue from their bravery, I think is inspiring.
Cool. Jennifer, did you ever imagine in your time as being an athlete that you would have to be defending girls' and women's rights like this in sports?
No, but you know what? I'll tell you this. In 2008, I wrote my first book. It was called Chalked Up, and it was a memoir about my time in gymnastics, which was very successful. I was a 7-time national team member and the 1986 national champion, but it was also fraught. The sport, which is now known for being incredibly abusive emotionally, physically, and there is sexual abuse that is rampant in the sport. I wrote a book about that. You wouldn't think that would be controversial necessarily, to speak out about this and to say it's not all coaches, but for the bad coaches, they need to not be in the sport anymore. It was, I mean, this was before me too. It was incredibly controversial. I was smeared by my USA teammates, by my own club teammates, and it went on for about 10 years until the Larry Nassar case broke. And then at which point everybody said, well, we always stood with her. So I guess my point is, in a sense, it's not surprising because here's the thing. The governing bodies in sport, whether it's the NCAA or the USA Gymnastics or USOPC, they're not going to do the right thing here unless forced. Yeah. They are currying favor with whoever the activists are at the moment, and they're never going to stand up and do the right thing unless, I have to say, they're shamed into doing so, which is what happened when Larry Nassar went to prison for life. Until then, all the reports, I mean, there have been reports of his abusiveness for 30 years. They did nothing. And they buried evidence. They had reports of other coaches being abusive. So they're certainly not going to do the right thing now until women and girls, and of course, men who support them, show up and say, not my sport.
Well, and of course, you are such an entrepreneur and you've got this can-do spirit that you decided to start your own clothing line, XXXY, just in case nobody quite got that there is a biological difference at the chromosomal level, XX versus XY. And you have an ad on TikTok. TikTok has banned your ad because you make a distinction between biological men and women?
Yeah, I mean, the ad is basically everything I just described. It's really inspiring, I think. It's not at all offensive, as they must seem to believe. And we only started advertising on TikTok a few days ago, and only a few days later we got the notification that we were banned permanently from advertising on TikTok because of this ad. Now, they said it violated their advertising policies. They did not tell us which policy was violated, but I can only glean that somehow they think that in this ad, in which we encourage women and girls to stand up for themselves and to not be silenced by people calling them names, that they somehow found that to be offensive and anti-trans. And I can only imagine that activists were reporting us. But, I encourage people to check out the ad for themselves. It's all over Twitter right now. I think we've gotten, since we've been banned, people have kind of come to rally behind us.
Yeah.
And I think we've had over 7 million views of the ad on Twitter or something like that.
I saw this stat that in the 2018-2019 school year, girls' participation in high school sports actually declined. And that's the first time in 30 years. This is, I don't think we have the stats yet for years since then, but do you think that this is because of this advent of spaces being invaded by biological men and this whole redefinition of what it means to be a female athlete?
You know what? I can't really say back to 18-19 if that was why, but obviously over the course of COVID, I think it would be pretty obvious that participation declined due to that because school sports were shut down for 2 years. So once people are sort of banned or barred from competing, many don't come back. So I think there's been a series of events that have happened, and less people kind of not understand. When girls and young women participate in sports, there's so many developmental benefits. They have better self-esteem. They're less depressed. They're less anxious. They get better grades in high school. They're more likely to graduate from high school. This isn't necessarily about becoming the state champion or the national champion. It's about all those developmental benefits. And, people will often say to me, there's only a handful of trans athletes who are competing in women's sports. What's the big deal? Well, it's not really a handful. In the last few years alone, there's 600. And that affects every girl and young woman who competes in sports, which is thousands. That's tens of thousands. That's, 50% of the student population. And so it's not a small number. And that number of 600, that means 600 times males who are competing as females have taken trophies, team spots, scholarships, all of that away from a deserving female. That's not okay. Or injured a deserving female. That's not okay. And that number is accelerating as we see this, gender ideology thing continue to grow and pick up steam. You have more and more instances of this. So I certainly think it's a discouragement now. And my fear is girls will continue to stand down and not compete, because if you don't think you have a fair and an even playing field and you don't have a shot at winning, why would you?
Well, listen, one way that you can advance this cause and continue to stand by women and protect women's sports is, of course, coming to the rally on Tuesday, and we'll have more to talk about that on Monday and Tuesday of next week here in D.C. But also, check out the XXXY Athletics line of clothing. It's xx-xyathletics.com. Jennifer Say, honestly, it's always a great conversation with you, and it was wonderful meeting you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'll see everyone in D.C.
Excellent. 8:45 WMAL.